السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين واتبعوا بإحسان يوم الدين أما بعد. I just want to remind myself, and I would like to remind you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He said in the Quran, اذكروني واذكروكم واشكروا لي ولا تكفرون. He said, if you remember me, I will remember you, and to be grateful to me, and don't disbelieve. I want to remind something one of the da'i said to me. He said, whenever you come to the masjid, he said that if somebody brought food for Allah's sake, even if you're not hungry, he said, take a smidgen of it because it has barakah in it, because the person brought it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sake. I just would like to announce that we have this week coming donuts and coffee and maybe tea, inshallah. And if anybody would like to donate for next week's class, inshallah, see Brother Ali. Brother Ali, he generally sits on the end, but inshallah, you can just give him a donation, and we try to circulate that so that all of us can gain the favor of remembering Allah in Allah's house. All right, inshallah, I want to give the mic to Abu Zayd, inshallah. Barakallahu fi. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillah. Inshallah, the coffee is going to be here in a minute. All right. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. I need one brother to be the reader today and to help me get some books off that shelf. Somebody want to volunteer who's good at looking through hadith books? Huh? No, wait, you got to read it. You got to do the whole package. Okay, Brother Dawood volunteered. Okay. No. So, Brother Dawood, I need the Riyadh Salihin. You get those, and then I'll tell you what pages. I'm not sure it's volume 1 and 2, but you could get both. Riyadh Salihin. Bring both. Yeah. I think it's one. It might be in one. No. It might be in one. I got it, brother. Yeah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullah. Where were you last week? Alhamdulillah. There you go. Yeah, but you're gonna read. I'll tell you one. Is this Hadith 74? When I tell you, yeah, just keep it ready. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. So let's begin. It's time is short. What I'm going to do today is a case study, a practical look at the difference between Bukhari and other books. And I apologize, I don't have all my notes. I've been working with taking the water out of the basement the last couple of days. So I know all of you are probably busy with the same thing. So we just been running around, alhamdulillah. So we're going to read first a hadith from Riyadh al-Salihin, and then I'm going to show you the problem. And I'm going to show you how Bukhari, rahimahullah, solved that problem. And hopefully that will give you an idea how Bukhari was really the best of our muhaddithin. So there's a hadith in Riyadh al-Salihin. Well, I mean, it's in original books, but Riyadh al-Salihin is a secondary collection where Imam Nawawi, rahimahullah ta'ala, compiled like a selection from all the books in a nice, series of chapters. So, all of us, we don't have time to read. Most of us don't have time to read Bukhari, all 9 volumes, to read Tirmidhi, Abu Dawud. These are massive collections. So what scholars did to make it easier, many scholars, they compiled like selections of hadith from all the books in books that are smaller and easier for you and me to read. So this has been going on for hundreds of years. So there are a lot of selections of hadith. You got summarized Bukhari, you got summarized 6 books, but there are 2 in the world that became the most popular. One in the East and one in the West. So in the West, and when I say East and West, that means in the Muslim world. We're not talking about West as in America, the Americas. We're talking about in the Muslim world, there was one book, a summarized book that became very famous in the East, and one that became very famous in the West. In the West, we're talking about Africa, we're talking about Arabia, we're talking about Iraq, we're talking about Damascus, talking about Palestine. So the one in the West that became the most famous is Riyadh al-Salihin by Imam al-Nawawi. So that's, if you look at, Brother Dawood has volume 1 right there. It's only 2 volumes and with the English translation. In the Arabic, it would be one volume. But it's an excellent book. It's got great chapters. Every chapter begins with verses of Quran. There's a chapter on piety, chapter on salah, chapter on this. And it's got good hadith in there, selections that Imam Nawawi picked from various books. And then the East, who knows what the book in the East is that became the most famous in the East? It's very similar to Riyadh al-Salihin. And the same size, like it's about 2 volumes, I think, or 3 volumes in the English translation. And we do have it in English. It's probably the one in the West got more famous. Riyadh al-Salihin is more famous. But at one point in time, the one in the East was more famous. And people weren't reading Riyadh al-Salihin as much. But today, I guess Riyadh al-Salihin is more popular. Anyone know the one in the East? No. I mean, that's a book on agreed upon hadith, I think, from Bukhari and Muslim. That wasn't that popular. That's something more recent. I'm talking about the last 500 years. Yeah. Like Riyadh al-Salihin, Imam Nawawi lived 600, 700 years ago. Well, more than that, actually more than that. No, Ibn Qayyim doesn't have a hadith book. I'm talking about a book of hadith. It's just hadith, you know. Yes. Yeah, Mishkat al-Masabih. Mishkat al-Masabih. Mishkat is for like this is the Riyadh, that's Mishkat, the niche of the lamps. So Mishkat is what they study in India, in Afghanistan, in Indonesia, and maybe Indonesia because it's Shafi'i, they study Riyadh al-Salihin more. But at least in the East, like Khorasan, Afghanistan, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, all this East, massive area, and in Persia, all the Khorasan area, it's Mishkat by Imam Tabrizi. So it's very similar. They're both very similar books, but that's what they study. So a scholar who studies in India, like, and you graduate from a seminary in India, or Pakistan. When I say India, I mean that whole area. If you come from there and you do that, the alim course, Darul Ulum, generally they study Mishkat. So that's their hadith study. Oh really? The one I have is from the 80s. And Sheikh Albani did some notes on it. So it's published in English a long time ago. But then it was never republished. The Riyadh al-Salihin became more famous. So you have a lot of editions of Riyadh al-Salihin. So anyway, both of these, Mishkat in the East, Riyadh al-Salihin in the West, they're very popular books because they make it easier for you to read hadith. So they have very nice chapters and it's easy. And that's what people study. And even now we're so lazy, even these books are too big for us. So you got 2 volumes of Riyadh al-Salihin. How many people have read that cover to cover? You know, it's still a lot for us because human beings are getting more lazy over time and we're getting less sophisticated, and unfortunately. So now a big book for us is 40 hadith, the Arba'in. So even there are many Muslims that have never read the Arba'in, 40 hadith. So anyway, so these are great books. But now let's read a hadith from the book and I'll show you the problem with these books. Okay? And my theory, my contention to you is, amazing books that they are not the original. And when you read these, you might get misguided. But okay, I'm just clickbaiting you. You're supposed to read these excellent books. But what I'm saying, if you only rely on these books, you might fall into confusion and misguidance because these aren't the original. These aren't like Imam Nawawi is taking from Bukhari and Muslim and other books. And same thing with Mishkat. But if you really want to know what a hadith is saying, you've got to go to the original. Anyway, we're going to read hadith number 74. Brother Dawood is going to read it for us. And this is chapter 7 of Riyadh al-Salihin. That chapter is called Chapter on Firm Belief and Reliance on Allah. Babul Yaqeen wa Tawakkul. So the chapter is about relying on Allah, tawakkul, and conviction, yaqeen. So the first hadith in that chapter, Imam Nawawi relates What does he say all the way at the end? Where's the hadith from? So is hadith, you got the hadith? So read. So at the end, Nawawi says this hadith is in Bukhari and Muslim. So, and that tells you even Imam Nawawi knew Bukhari and Muslim were the best, the most sound. So he tries to bring hadith that are both in Bukhari and Muslim first in the chapters, and then he brings other books. So this idea I'm teaching you in the seminar that Bukhari was the cream of the crop. Nobody approached his level. Everyone knew that in the Ummah. And for proof of that, you go to any book, even Mishkat, even Riyadh al-Salihin. Every chapter they begin with Quran. And then they try to bring a hadith of Bukhari and Muslim both. And then they bring the other hadith. So every scholar, Imam Nawawi, Imam Tabridi, the whole Ummah knew that Bukhari and Muslim are the soundest books of hadith. And in that, Bukhari is first, Muslim is second. And if something's in Bukhari and Muslim, both of them agree upon it, it's called agreed upon, that's even higher. So that's a good rule of thumb for you guys. So now let's read the hadith that Imam Nawawi says is in Bukhari and Muslim. So you can read the English, and I'll just stop you point by point. This. Okay, so this is the Prophet ﷺ speaking. So the hadith is from Ibn Abbas, right? So this is the Prophet, right? And it's coming from Ibn Abbas. I'm just making the isnad. Okay. Hadith is from Ibn Abbas, who said, so the Prophet saw a dream, and he saw many nations in the dream. That's a famous hadith. Sure, all of you. This is the hadith where 70,000 believers will go to paradise without any account. That's a nice hadith, and it's very important for us. Okay, continue.
I saw a prophet with a small part. Some prophets had only one or two followers with them. Some had none.
Okay, so the Prophet looking at all these people on the Day of Judgment, and he saw a lot of prophets. Some prophets only had 5 people with them, 10 people with them, and there were prophets without any people with them. Continue.
And suddenly I saw a huge crowd, and I thought that they might be my people. But I was informed, these are Prophet Moses' followers and his followers, but look towards the horizon.
Okay, so then the Prophet saw a huge crowd, and he became hopeful. He's looking for his people, his ummah. So he saw a huge crowd, and he said, I thought that this was my ummah, and he was told, no, these are Moses' people, the believers with Musa alayhi salam. Go ahead.
I looked and saw a huge crowd. Then I asked to look to the other side of the horizon. There too I saw a huge multitude. I was informed, these are your followers. Among them there are 70.
Okay, stop. So then the angels told him, no, those are Musa's people, but hey, look to your right. So the Prophet looked to his right and a massive crowd. And then he said, look to your left. And he saw a massive crowd. So he saw on both sides, not just one area. So then it was told, these are your ummah. So this is the angel speaking to Allah, speaking to the Prophet on behalf of Allah. So he said, these are your people. And then what did it say?
These are your followers, and among them there are 70,000 who shall enter paradise without any accounting or suffering.
So the Prophet, he was told, among this massive crowd, there are 70,000 that will enter paradise without any account. Okay, go ahead.
Then the Prophet stood up and went to his chambers, and his companions began speculating about those who would enter paradise without any accounting or suffering.
So now what the Prophet did, he left people in suspense, because that's his way of teaching. He just left. Imagine telling that story, and then you just leave. So he left the masjid, and everyone's sitting there, the companions are debating. What are they saying?
Some said that they might be those who have the honor of having some associated with the Holy Prophet. Some others guessed that it may be that they are the persons who have been born Muslims and have never associated anyone with Allah, and so forth. On hearing this, the Holy Prophet came out of his room and asked, "What are you discussing?" The gathering apprised him accordingly. He said, "They are those who do not..."
Hold on. So that's the punchline. Okay. So the companions, they had different theories. Some of them, they said, well, they're probably the people who embraced Islam earlier. They had more time to do good deeds. Some of them said maybe they're the people who were born Muslim. That was an opinion too. It's the people born Muslim. Why? Because they never committed shirk in their life. Because they were already born into faith. Okay, go on.
He said, there are those who do not make charms or amulets, nor use them, and do not believe in omens, but trust in their Lord. On this, a companion.
Okay, so he gave a series of characteristics. That's what I'm going to list, and we're going to discuss that. But let's skip that and finish the hadith.
On this, a companion, Hazrat Ukasha ibn Muqsin, radiyallahu anhu, stood up and requested to supplicate Allah that he may be one of them. The Prophet alayhi salam said, "You are one of them." Then another stood up and asked for the same. The Prophet alayhi salam answered, "Akasha has taken a lead over you."
Okay, that's the end of the hadith. Okay, perfect. Jazakallah khair. So after the Prophet said that hadith, Rukasha, one of the companions, and this is the old school translation, the book is falling apart. So it was translated by people from my area. So that's why you see the word Hazrat before Ibn Abbas and Hazrat before Rukasha. Hazrat just means, it's a title. Like Hazrat Maulana, Hazrat, it's holy prophet. That holy part, or the blessed companion, Hazrat. So it's an old translation. It doesn't work in English, but the new books don't have that. Anyway, so this companion, Rukasha, he took the lead and he said, "Oh Messenger of Allah, make dua that I'm from them." And then the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Anta minhum," you are from them. And then other companions raised their hand, "Can you make dua for me?" And the Prophet said, "Too late. Rukasha beat you to it." So it's a great hadith. This hadith teaches you so many things. I mean, that's not our lesson here, but look how the Prophet taught, how he kept people engaged, how he had questions and answers, he put them in suspense. And then you can see how the companions competing with one another, but there's always that one that's ahead of everyone else. And so you got followers and you got leaders. Ukasha was the leader, and the rest were followers. So anyway, so this is important. Like this is this not something hugely important to the ummah? What are those characteristics that the Prophet described these people with that make 70,000 people enter paradise without any account? And that's something amazing. If that's something, I mean, if there's such a thing as people going to Jannah without accounting, who wouldn't want to be like that? But it's not going to be easy. So that's not going to be easy. It's going to be very difficult. It's not going to be, it's going to be something that's above and beyond the calling of Islam. It's going to be like something special. It's not going to be just, Prophet's not going to say they're the people who pray 5 times a day. And it's going to be everybody that does that. So anyway, so we got to, I'm going to read the characteristic. He mentioned 3 things. So the first thing he says, هُمُ الَّذِينَ لَا يَرْقُونَ. Okay, let me write it here. And then you can read the translation. I forgot how they translated that. They are the ones, la yarqoon. What is the translation about that? The first point. They are the ones. What does it say?
The first part of hadith.
Look for the word 70,000, and then under that will be the next.
Okay. Some of them. Okay, that probably encountering and suffering, some said that they might be those who have honored.
No, beyond that, like when the answer, with the Prophet's answer.
Maybe that person is born Muslim?
No, it's right here. He said, this is it, from here. What is
He
this?
said, there are those who do not make charms or amulets, nor use them, and do not believe in omens, but trust in their Lord.
Okay, that translation is a little off. They took some liberty there, but the first thing is la yarqun. They do not do yarqun. What is yarqun? Who knows what yarqun is? This word, it comes from ruqya. La yarqun is ruqya. So they are the ones who don't perform ruqya. What is ruqya?
Since they make dua or use Quran to heal.
Yes, reciting Quran to heal or dua to heal, for healing or for some purpose. So that's one. Does that make sense to you? Okay, let's leave it. And the second one, so la yarqun, we're going to talk about that. The second one, wala yastarqun. So what does that say? So they translate yarqun as make amulets. Ruqya, I mean, that's not amulets. I mean, it's a. So the Riyadh al-Salihin, I have the Darus Salam version. It says they are those who do not make ruqya. And then the second thing, la yastarqun. What do you think this means compared to the yarqun versus yastarqun? If you know Arabic. Seek ruqya, yes. Seek ruqya. Like the yastar, or when you add this is the 10th form, right? That's seeking, like ghafara, to forgive. Istaghfara, to seek forgiveness. Same thing, yarqun, to do ruqya. Yastarqun, to seek ruqya. What is seek ruqya? What would that mean, seek ruqya? What's the difference? What's the difference between 1 and 2? One is actually doing it. That's what I heard. What did he say about the first? Or the second, like? Well, seeking is asking. So one is actually doing it, and the other is asking someone to do it. So that's the difference. One is doing ruqya, so it would be like before you sleep, you read Qul Huwallahu Ahad, blow on your hands and just rub your body. That's a ruqya. That's from the Sunnah. Or you have a headache, you recite Surah Al-Fatiha. I mean, that's ruqya. Or you make dua, oh Allah, you recite dua just for the purpose of healing and things like that, or protection. So that's one. So you can see one is ruqya, one is doing ruqya, seeking ruqya. Maybe I'll put doing here. Seeking ruqya from others. One is yourself, the other is with others. And what's the next one? وَلَا يَتَطَيَّرُونَ. What is the translation?
Do not believe in omens.
Yes, good. يَتَطَيَّرُونَ. Omens. Seeking omens or perceiving omens. This translation has perceive omens. What did you have? Believe in omens. Okay. So tiyara in Arabic, this is kind of easy to, it's basically superstition. Tiyara is basically, exactly. So it comes from the word tayara, or tayr, which means birds. And the Arabs at that time, they had this superstition with birds. They would look at the flights of birds and say, well, today this is going to happen. Today's a bad day. Today's a good luck, bad luck. So it's basically looking at certain signs in creation for looking for signs of bad luck. So it's kind of like in America, you have rabbit's foot, you have knock on wood, that we keep doing that. So, I mean, it's not just with birds. It used to be with birds. Even in the Roman Empire, it was with birds. Every Roman emperor, even in Europe, they had augurs. Augurs are those who do divination. So they were like professional astrologers that would look at birds and tell, the emperor, today is a good day for battle or a bad day for battle. So it's like astrology. You can place under here astrology, superstition, all types of forms of bad luck. And then the last thing is the summary. The fourth quality is the summary. So all this leads to number 4, which is وَعَلَى رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. وَعَلَى رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ. So this is tawakkul. Trust in God. So now step back and think about these qualities, right? So Rookia, seeking Rookia, omens. So these people don't do this, they don't do this, they don't do this, but they do this. That's what the Prophet is saying. They trust in Allah. So they don't do these. So let's work backwards. If you look at items for bad luck, are you trusting in Allah? No. So we can see superstition takes you away from tawakkul, from trusting God. Because now you're looking at silly things like rabbit's feet and a black cat crossing your road or the mirror breaking. I mean, every society has these superstitions. And the believer knows they have no meaning. There's nothing, like if you let those things, seeing a black cat in front of you, affect you, and where you know what, I'm not going to do this, you're letting things, you're basically doing omens. That's exactly what you're doing at tatayyarun. Because now you're not trusting in Allah, but you're looking at these like silly things that increase, that have no value, that have no power. The cat has no power. The wood has no power. The mirror has no power. The birds, they're just flying on their own. They're not flying to tell you what's going on. So all these things are false. It all falls very close to shirk. A lot of it is shirk and some of it is close to shirk. So you can understand. So working backward, they don't do this because they trust in God. Now number 2, I'm working backwards. Number 2, seeking ruqya from others. So in this pattern, seeking ruqya from others would take you away from trusting in God. How do you make that connection? How would asking someone to do ruqya take you away from trusting in Allah?
Because you're asking that person because you don't have enough belief to think that he's going to do it for you, so you ask someone else.
Good.
If you're close to Allah,
Yeah, excellent. That's good. What did you have to say? Okay, so the power to someone else. So when you ask someone to make dua for you, you're not giving them power. He's still calling on Allah. So it wouldn't be, that's not the best way to phrase it, because that would be like you ask that person to heal you. That would be giving him. But now you ask him to ask Allah. That's what seeking ruqya of others is. So you still believe Allah is the one who's doing it, but you still took yourself one step away from Allah. You put another human being in between you and Allah. So even though it's not haram, is that haram? Is this haram? The omens? Yeah, this is haram. But number 2, is this haram to ask someone, hey, can you make dua for you? It's not haram. But we're not talking about haram. We're talking about higher level. People who get to paradise without account. So we're looking at a higher level of functioning of belief. So in that, you can appreciate people who always ask others to make dua, to recite ruqya. I mean, I have people come to me all the time in our practice. You know, I'm going through this. Do you know any sheikh that does ruqya? And people are willing to. People are spend. There are brothers and sisters out there that spend thousands of dollars giving this sheikh money in Brooklyn to do a hijama and ruqya, recite over them because they believe they're possessed by jinn or whatever. Majority of them are psychological problems. But they're putting all their trust on these human beings. They drive to Brooklyn to get the sheikh, or they ask, and these sheikhs charge money, and then they come and they recite Quran. Why can't that person recite Quran directly, right? Like, so because they believe they're not worthy of it, or they have other ideas. So they don't believe, they don't trust in Allah enough. So they ask others to do it, and they spend so much resources. So that's why complete trust in God is not going to make you like rely on other people all the time, because you know you have that direct connection. So even 3 and 2, these are great. So it's not haram, but the people with the higher level of belief, they will never ask another human to do that, because they know that Allah hears them. Yes. No, 3 is haram. That's just a side thing. That's not essential to it. I'm just doing a side thing. 3 is haram, because you're not supposed to believe in bad luck. That's haram, and it might even be shirk in some situations. But number 2 is not necessarily haram, because you can ask other people to make ruqya or make dua for you. That's not haram. That's like cooperating with one another in righteousness. But it's still not a higher level of trust in God. So we're talking about people who forego that because they trust in God so much. That's why they're going to make it to paradise. I didn't get to 1. I'm talking about 2. So you got to wait. I told you I'm working backwards, right? So we did 3. I just need you to understand 3. I need you to understand 2, and then I'll get to 1. Any questions so far? Yes, right. Yeah, but that's okay. And that's the second person had that idea. Seeking ruqya from others, not shirk. Because you're not asking that person to heal you. If you ask that person to heal you, yeah, that's shirk. But we're not doing that. We're saying, can you ask Allah to heal me? So that's not haram. But it's not full tawakkul. Yes. Yeah, go ahead. Excellent. Yeah, let one brother be in charge of the mic then. I mean, I can. Okay, was there any other question?
Yes, my question it's like a question and a comment, and one maybe you have to deconstruct the question. I don't know, but for seeking ruqya, for example, right? If a person can it be the case where a person say I feel like I'm afflicted by a jinn or some type of entity, possession, or I'm having issues, and I go to a raqi, but I'm not believing that he's necessarily. I don't know, it's not a lack of tawakkul, but could be a lack of knowledge. So if I know somebody specialized or is known to be specialized in dealing with these issues, it's like going to a doctor. Like if you have an alien man, if you have a broken ankle, so I'm gonna rely on Allah and let it heal. I don't know if this is a good analogy but I'm saying for a person who's suffering, they feel they don't have no way out and they don't have the knowledge. That's the key, the knowledge. So they go to a Raqi who's known to be specialized in ayats of the Quran, and we have precedent from the Prophet ﷺ, the Sahaba Hill, people with Fatah, we know this already. So how could that be not relying on Allah? That's my question. If you look at a person that specializes, he's a'la minni in this field. So I want help.
Okay, good question. That's excellent. So the question is, we have professionals in every field. So if you're dealing with some issues, why can't you go to a professional who's a raqi, who does ruqya? Raqi is one who does ruqya. There are professional people in the community. So going to them, how is that wrong? So, or how does that take away from tawakkul? So good question. So the answer there is, it's not wrong. So I never said, that's why when I said this is haram, this is not. I said the reason I made that comment, so nobody would be in a misconception that it's wrong to do this. It's not wrong to do that. You can ask other people for help. You can rely on other people. So it's perfectly okay. Even the Prophet gave precedence for that. He asked people to do that. Nothing wrong with that.
That's really my question. How does that manifest as
Okay,
a
so
person not
that's the
trusting
real
Allah?
question. Okay.
Right.
So nothing wrong with this, okay? But now the question is, so here's the thing. The people getting into paradise without hisab, you think it's going to be easy? You think it's just going to be regular Muslims? No. So this is a higher level that not everyone is expected to achieve. Not everyone can achieve. So it's kind of like, so it's the hadith of Ibn Abbas. Remember, this is also related by Ibn Abbas. So I just thought about that right now. Sometimes companions, they relate certain themes, a hadith that are related to the same theme, often. Like Hudhayfa ibn al-Yaman is always relating hadith, speaking about the end of times and the munafiqeen and things like that. That's just because everybody's mind works differently. But Ibn Abbas was the one, he said, Kuntu khalfa Rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Qala li. I was riding behind the Prophet one day and he gave me some advice. He said, Ya ghulam, inni u'allimuka kalimatin. I will teach you some words, young boy, that you hold on to them and Allah will protect you. Ihfadillah yahfadak. Ista'in billah. So among those advices that the Prophet gave him, Ista'in billah. Seek help from Allah. Okay? So, and you know, we recite in Fatih, Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. Isti'ana. So seek help from Allah. How do you square that concept away with seeking help from others? Is it wrong for asking others for help? It's not wrong. But Allah placed in this world different levels, right? And you got to recognize there are certain levels. So when there were some of the companions, they would pledge, like some of the companions had this higher level of thinking where if they would drop their pen, they wouldn't ask, brother, can you please pick that up for me? They would never ask their fellow brothers for even little things like, or their saddle. The example they give is saddle of the horse. They would not ask, can you please give it? They would get off the animal, pick it up themselves. Why? Because they were trying to get this higher level. So you can appreciate they're both okay, seeking ruqya and help from others, but then there's a person who just doesn't do that. There are people in the community, it's not a lot. There are awliya in the community that, you know, they don't, I mean, you don't know their state because they're just not public about everything. They're not asking you for others. There are people out there, okay, can you appreciate there's a brother or a sister that's always asking for help every week? My basement's flooded. My neighbor called me the other day and I've been working with him for 3 days. He called me. I mean, I know he's not listening and I'm not telling you which neighbor, but he called me. Well, first I said, do you need help? I was reaching out because I had a lot of water too, but I didn't have a lot of damage. And he said, no. I said, look, you're my neighbor. I guess it's all right. And he said, okay. Then he called me that evening. Then he called me the next day. And then I was driving to work. He said, look, I need you for 10 minutes before you go to work at 8 o'clock in the morning. So he kept calling me. But can you appreciate there's one personality trait, always asking for help. And there's one personality trait that no matter what, they go through poverty. They could be starving. And they have this trust in God. They know Allah is bringing the rizq like He brings to the birds. And they will never ask someone for help. And isn't there a verse in the Quran where, what's that verse where you seek out the people who are needy, but they don't manifest it? Because they are on this higher level. They're not really asking for help. They're not looking for help. And if they see someone helping, they will not take it. They will not take a handout. So even though it's not haram to ask for help, but you can appreciate there are different levels here. And that's what this is talking about, the higher level. Yes.
Brother Zaid, I was just thinking about how they said that when the Sahabas used to sit around and when the Prophet was given something, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like a bowl of milk or something, and he would pass it. They said that when it got to Omar, he would put his lips exactly where the Prophet's lips were, where other people would just take it and just drink it, you know? Yeah.
Okay.
When you visit a sick, 70,000 angels go with you. Now, when you visit a sick and you ask the sick person to make dua for you, What category do that fall under?
So Ruqya is a little different from dua, but the concept is very similar. So scholars say this is probably not speaking about people who occasionally do that, but it's probably talking about people who are doing it all the time. Because you can appreciate the one who does it all the time really believes like there's a problem with his tawakkul. Because the one who's excessively relying on others, even though you're relying on them for something good, but always relying on others, you're putting a middleman. So then that would take away from your trust. But someone who does that occasionally, meet your shaykh, you ask for dua, that's not what this means, inshallah. Yeah, or you visit someone who's sick. It's like, okay. So that's 3, that's 2. Now we come to number 1, performing ruqya. So let's try to make a connection. Doing ruqya, how would that take away from trusting? So this is doing it yourself. So how could that try to come up with some reason, thinking. So we kind of understood this, although everyone wasn't on the same page. This is very obvious. This is less obvious. And now ruqya, how could ruqya take away from trusting God? How could it possibly? Yes, go ahead.
Probably because it's a delay between your everyday practicing, believing that the help is coming from Allah because you're already doing that, as opposed to saying, okay, let me stop that and let me go to ask somebody to make ruqya or to make ruqya.
So you're saying maybe tawakkul would be just keep doing what you're doing and know that Allah is going to help you instead of asking for help?
Asking also at the same time in it as opposed to making ruqya.
Okay. I see where you're going. It's good. But still, I don't buy it. Yeah.
Well,
I'm still I need more comprehension in terms of the one.
Number
of
1?
Doing Rookia.
So we're talking about that now. We just got to it.
What's the basic? You gave a definition before of a basic.
Ruqya is basically Qul huwa Allahu ahad, and you blow on it. That's Ruqya. Like reciting Quran, basically. That's the basic type of Ruqya. So, but my question is, how would that take away from tawakkul doing Ruqya?
I think this is doing ruqya on yourself, right?
Of yourself, yeah.
Okay.
Or it could be on someone else.
On someone else. I would think that you may start to become under the impression that whenever you do a certain action, things happen for you. Like, okay, so you do ruqya on yourself, you're like, okay, I feel better because I did this, and sometimes that could blur the fact that Allah is like the real doer of things. So the association between your success in a particular practice may make you believe, or let's say you're conscious of the fact that Allah did that.
I like where everyone's going. That so maybe it might make your mind trust in the process and not the source, which is God. So that could be the case. But okay, so now, let me read you. So this hadith, Imam Nawawi says, is in Bukhari and Muslim. Okay? Let me read you the hadith from Bukhari. Okay? Let's see, I think I had it saved somewhere. I hope. Let's see. So this hadith comes from Ibn Abbas, from Sa'id bin Jubayr. In Bukhari, and I don't have the, so in Bukhari it appears about 3 or 4 times, this hadith. And so in Bukhari, the version says, Humul ladina la yatatayarun. Okay, that's Bukhari has this, la yatatayarun. Maybe I should list it separately. Okay, well, I'll do this. Maybe the orange. So Bukhari has la yatatayarun, right? This is Bukhari. And that, there's no question, we understand that. The second thing, Bukhari says, la yastarqun. Same thing. And we kind of understood, how that's a higher level and like does take away at some level tawakkul. And then the last one, Bukhari says, la yaktawun, his version, hadith, la yaktawun. And this is, so Bukhari doesn't have la yarqun anywhere, seeking ruqya. But he has yaktawun as cauterization. Okay. So, if you look in Sahih Muslim, same isnad, Sa'id bin Jubair down to different level of teachers, has the same thing. La yaktawun, la yastarqun, la yatatayarun. So in Bukhari and Muslim, in both, they have a different version of the hadith. It doesn't have ruqya, but Muslim at the end of the chapter has this version, okay, with the ruqya. But in Bukhari, the ruqya is not there. So that's an important question. So first of all, Imam Nawawi made a mistake. He said it's in Bukhari and Muslim. It is not. In Riyadh al-Salihin for the last 700 years, people read that and they read this hadith is in Bukhari and Muslim. Yes, that hadith is there. The Prophet saw the dream. He saw all those communities. But when you get to the punchline, Humul ladina la yaktawun, la yastarqun, la yatatayarun. That's the hadith in Bukhari. Cauterization, but not the ruqya. Why? Because the ruqya is a mistake. Ruqya is a mistake. Because ruqya is reciting Allah's words. Reciting the kalam of Allah. How could that take away from tawakkul? It makes no sense. Reciting the Quran is never will take you away from tawakkul. That's Allah's word. We're not talking about ruqya with other things. We're not talking about asking other people to do ruqya. Having a professional raqi, you just sit there and you just have them recite over you. We're talking about you reciting Quran yourself. That can never take away from trust in Allah. That's trust in Allah. You're using His kalam. So this is a mistake. This whole version of ruqya is a mistake. And if you open up Bukhari today, I'll tell you, it's not there. Bukhari has this, la yaktawun in place of that, and the other two are the same. Okay? So that's the first thing. So Bukhari knew that this was a mistake. He never included this version. He got the right isnad, and he got the right version. But the one with the ruqya, it comes in Sahih Muslim, but at the end of his chapter, although he has this one first. So that means even Muslim kind of knew that this was a lesser reliable version. Why did he put it at the end of the chapter? We have to do more research. Perhaps he knew it was weak, and just to show you its weakness, sometimes Muslim does that. He gives you a whole bunch of hadith in the chapter, then he puts a weak hadith at the end of the chapter to show you that it's weak. So it's not necessarily the case that Muslim related it. It is in his Sahih in the end of the chapter. But it could be, it's possible that he believed it was Sahih. But Bukhari, where this class is about Bukhari, Bukhari did not accept this. He had his isnad, and it does not contain la yarqum. Okay? Because ruqya, just emphasize, ruqya will never take away from tawakkul. What is this talking about? These are things that take you away from tawakkul. And ruqya cannot do that because ruqya is reciting Allah's word. It doesn't fit in the pattern here. And the hadith as narrated in Bukhari does not have that there with its own isnad. Yes, brother.
Abu Zayd, are you going to at some point in our classes talk about how each of the muhaddithin, how they set their particular collection up? Which
Yeah.
here comes a very important point.
Yeah, that's important. I mean, there's a lot to learn in hadith, the way the books are constructed. So inshallah, maybe in hadith 101 or 102. But so let's get, this is wrong. So Riyadh al-Salihin, if you read Riyadh al-Salihin, you're going to get wrong information on at least one part. The whole hadith is correct, but this first characteristic is wrong. And he misattributed it to Bukhari, and it's not in Bukhari. Okay, so that's my point. My first point to you is, don't read secondary sources. Don't read it. You can read them. Always take them with a grain of salt. Don't rely on them. You got to rely on the original. If you were reading Bukhari, you would never fall into this trap. You would never be trying to think, Rookia, what's the common denominator there? Rookia is perfectly valid. That's something the Prophet ﷺ did, and he advises to recite the Quran, to read it. It's a shifa. The Quran says it's what shifa. It can never take away from tawakkul. So how could that be a characteristic of the people enter paradise? So if you want to ask why, okay, how did he make it there? I'll tell you what scholars said. I'll read you some. Ibn al-Qayyim, he says, فَقَوْلُهُ فِي الْحَدِيثِ لَا يَرْقُونَ غَلَطٌ مِنَ الرَّاوِي. This word that they do not perform ruqya is a mistake from a narrator that put that word in there, that characteristic in there. And سَمِعْتُ شَيْخَ الْإِسْلَامِ ibn Taymiyyah يَقُولُ ذَلِكَ. Ibn al-Qayyim says, I heard my Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah say that to me. Ibn Taymiyyah considered this word to be a mistake. Bukhari also considered it to be a mistake. He never put it in his book. So now we have Imam Nawawi relating this hadith from a mistaken version, and he put it in the most popular book, one of the most popular books of hadith. No one has Bukhari in their house. I mean, some people do, but almost everyone has Riyadh al-Salihin in their house. So that's the problem of reading books without this understanding, without teachers, without having some guide, and without reading the primary sources. People do that all the time here. Like, people are always quoting, even in our time, they're always quoting other people, and they're misquoting. When you go to the original books, the quotes are not like that, And that's what all this culture of refutation among non-Muslims with the news, and as well as among Muslims. All this culture of refutation, this person said this person believes in shirk, this person. When you read those original words of that person, that's not what they said. But we kind of misquote them, and then they get repeated from secondary, tertiary sources. Go to the primary sources, and you will be safe. That's my primary lesson here.
Yes.
Okay, and now I'll go around. Yes, brother.
You mentioned a sound hadith, and then you mentioned the weak hadith. And what is the reason for the weak hadith being shown?
Oh, in Sahih Muslim, you mean?
Yes.
So you have to understand how that goes to why or how the books are constructed. So Imam Muslim, what he does is, I have a chart for that, but we don't have the screens. I can't put the chart on the board, but maybe I can. Let me see what I can do for you. Well, let me finish with this. So Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn al-Qayyim, this is what they said. This is a mistake. That's one. And then Shaykh Ibn Baz said the same thing. Shaykh al-Uthaymeen said the same thing. That La Yarqoon is a mistake. This is a mistake in the hadith, even though it's in Riyadh al-Salihin and it's in one version of Sahih Muslim. But in Bukhari, he doesn't relate that. He doesn't accept that. And many other scholars said the same thing. So in conclusion, Rookia does not take away from tawakkul in any way. So this is a mistake where one of the sub-narrators probably, in narrating the hadith, they weren't that careful, and they put a word in there that kind of corrupts the meaning. Now, no one asked about this, so what does cauterization mean? Yeah, so cauterization is basically, it was a form of medical treatment back in the early, where they would use fire to treat your wounds. Okay, so you would take like when you have a wound, you would like take a blade or a sword, put in the coal, and let it burn. And then when the blade gets red hot, then you sear your wound in order to close the bleeding. So, I mean, in those days, the medical treatment wasn't advanced. So cauterization, al-kay, was one of the things that they used to treat many things with, abscesses and things like that. Over time, as medical treatment got advanced, this is no longer the case, and now we use other things, except there is a version of cauterization we use in surgery. You ever seen surgery? What they do when they cut up, they have these little, they burn the vessels to stop the bleeding. So they still do that during surgery. So that's cauterization. Now, the issue is, so the Prophet did not like it, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because generally he hated burning. So when he would discourage people from burning animals. Like there was somebody poured like lava inside an anthill, I think, and he said only Allah has the power to burn with the fire. It's not for us. And then he said, al-shifa'u fi thalath. Medical treatment is in three things. It's the hijama, the honey, the cup of honey, the cup of hijama, and al-kay, the cauterization. But then he says, I do not like cauterization. So he didn't prefer that. So how does it tie in here? It ties in here because, first of all, it wasn't a definitive treatment in those days for many things. And how would you translate that to our time? How does that take over tawakkul? It would be those people who rely on medical treatment too much. There are people like that. And even with this coronavirus, there are people talking about the mask as if this is going to save your life, and someone who takes the mask off. I mean, it does save your life at some level, but you got to be a little humble with that. You can't, someone takes the mask off, you are killing somebody. Because all their tawakkul is on the mask. So as believers, we do wear the mask. I'm a doctor. I'm not going to tell you not to get vaccinated, not to wear the mask. But don't put your tawakkul in this piece of cloth. We take the means and we rely on Allah. That's the difference. So this is a valid means, but if you trust the means and the process, and without trusting in Allah, you have to understand the process is flawed. Even with the best treatment we have for any disease, it's hit and miss. I mean, we have good treatments for many diseases, but still, there are people who don't respond to antibiotics, and infection kills them. There are people that COVID, we don't have any treatment anyway. Some people die from it, and there's not a damn thing doctors can do about it. They just watch them die in the hospitals. That's what we're doing. So in this whole process of life, believers need tawakkul. Doesn't mean you don't do medicine, you don't do treatment, but you do tawakkul. So, but if you excessively rely on means, asking others all the time, relying on medicine. I got people in my office every week, they're in my office, driving me nuts. And they don't need to be there, they have nothing. Every week, I got pain in my left pinky. And the next week, I might have pain in my toe. Now it's in the beginning of my pinky, not at the end. And I got to tell them that same medicine I gave is going to cover all your pain. But they just need to hear it because they have no tawakkul. They have their psychology is weak. And they're always just relying on others. That's how that relates. If you're excessively relying on physical means, like medicine and treatment, and not trusting in Allah enough, at some level that takes you away from tawakkul. This is not talking about someone who does it occasionally, someone who does medical treatment. And also, I would say, back then, medical treatment was very different than today. Today, there are certain treatments that are, they'll save your life versus not. So we trust in Allah, but these treatments come from Allah too. So like someone who's diabetic and his sugar is 600. He's in diabetic coma. That person can't say, I'm not going to take insulin because I'm going to trust in God. That's silliness. Because there are certain treatments that are lifesavers that you have to take. But then you have to recognize what treatments are not. And there it's your choice. I'm going to go to Clara, Mass right now to visit a patient of mine. He's like 50 years old. He has some stomach pain. And he's got everything's fine with him. And then gave him some medicine, didn't work. Came a week later, stomach's getting bigger and bigger. So then I didn't like the way he looked. And then I said, go to the hospital. And he got to the hospital, Now he's going on hospice. He's got cancer, pancreatic cancer spread all over his body without any warning. And the doctor said there's nothing they could do. They tried something, they gave him chemo, 1 round. It just spread even further. So now he's on hospice. He can hardly talk. His family's distraught. So that's the point. There are some treatments, like when it comes to cancer, for instance, certain types of cancer, for that person to say, you know what, I'm not going to take chemo, I agree with that. That's your personal decision, because it's not one of those things that are absolute. There are certain treatments you have to kind of make a judgment. This is really going to save your life, and it's foolishness not to do it. Versus this might do something or not, So it's complicated. Medical treatment is complicated. But what the Prophet ﷺ was trying to teach us is those who excessively rely on physical means without that trust in God. It's not that medicine that's going to save you. It's the trust in God while you're using his medicine, right? Okay.
I wanted to ask you, had you ever heard of this narration? I think I saw it in Omar al-Ashqar's book. And for all of us that don't know Omar al-Ashqar, he's a scholar from Jordan who sat with Sheikh Nasruddin al-Albani. It's on this issue of tawakkul. And I, at the time I saw it, I didn't look to see, well, who compiled it or whatever. But there was a man who said to another man, he said, I need 100 dirhams to get on a boat, to get to the other side of the river so that I can get this job. So the man said, do you have any collateral? He said, Allah is collateral. You don't believe Allah is collateral? The man said, yeah, I believe Allah is collateral. He said, okay then. So he said, okay. And he gave the man the 100 dirhams. He got to the other side of the river. He went to work, and then a big storm came. He couldn't get back on the boat to get back to pay the man during the time that he said it. Mm-hmm. So he said, oh Allah, you know that I intended to pay it, and you are collateral, oh Allah. So he tied the money to a rock, threw it into the river, and then the storm, subsided. He was able to take a boat and come back. He came back to the man's house and knocked on the door, gave the man salam, and said, here's your money back. He said, what are you talking about? I got the money. You tied it to a rock. No. Did you ever hear of this? Oh. You heard of it? I didn't know whether it was a fable or whether it's a hadith.
I mean, it's probably a parable. Hadith, I'm not sure it's a hadith. I mean, but these stories are meant to, so a lot of these early books, they had these stories. They're like parables meant to teach you a point. And the point is perfectly valid. You can find real life stories that match that in your own life, where, there are people that donated, they just gave everything they had, and then the next day they got a raise with the same amount. Or they had a bonus. That's happened to me many times. It's happened to people. The exact amount that you gave fi sabilillah, your intention was strong. You found it hidden somewhere that you never knew you had. So things like that happen all the time. But the point is tawakkul. If you believe Allah created you and created this world and He's in control, all you got to do is sit back and enjoy the ride. But those who don't do that, they're going to have anxiety, depression, and that's 99% of us. We don't have that trust. We're always so worried about our jobs, about this, about that. So we got to have more tawakkul in our lives. So, yes, brother.
So Zayd, is it to say that it's based on Iman?
Tawakkul is Iman, yes.
So with
tawakkul is a higher level of Iman.
Right, with the 70,000 that's going into Jannah, like the Prophet ﷺ said, it would be because of the Imam is so high and it's not wavering.
Absolutely.
So that's why we get with the Rookia, doing it, seeking it, and omens.
Not doing it is wrong, so eliminate that.
Wrong.
But
so
seeking it.
Is it the wavering of the Imam?
Yes, absolutely. So you can say their Iman is still good, but it's not at the level of my Iman and your Iman is not going to be like Abu Bakr's ever. Even the best of it will never be like Abu Bakr. Like Rukasha, the Prophet Sabaqaka Rukasha. Rukasha beat you to it. It's too late. Abu Bakr beat us to it. We will never reach that level of Iman. So for us to come here and say, well, I'm doing the same thing as he does, why am I not there? That's Iman is not plus or minus. Iman is it's a never-ending journey. Somebody's Iman could be all the way up there, and other person will be down here. Some might be real below. So this is what that's talking about. There are some people that have different levels of iman. Right?
Yes, Shaykh.
brother.
Inshallah, Allah says in the Quran, He says that I am to my servant as he or she thinks I am. Meaning that I can do for him or her whatever he or she thinks I can do. Let's say, a Muslim, he just got married, wife's pregnant, she just delivered. He's looking for a job, inshallah. So, he puts out a word to some, some friends in the community, inshallah, that I'm looking for work, this, that, and the third. But he comes home, every day, reads Quran, puts his trust in Allah, does the little things, to help people around the community, this, that, and the third. So by him taking that stance, knowing that everything is in the control of Allah, and Allah can do what He says He can do for whomever thinks He can do whatever He can do for them, that doesn't take away from the tawakkul, correct?
Right? So what doesn't take away from tawakkul? Like,
I'm saying, okay, in other
so
words,
that person, right? He's making dua, he's making reciting Quran.
no,
Does that take away from tawakkul? No, of course not.
But what I'm saying is that a person that does that, that puts their faith and their trust in Allah to that point, would that be someone that would be considered among the 70,000?
Oh, I can't answer that. I can't answer that. That's for Allah. But so tawakkul. There's one thing I gotta say: tawakkul and means. So and we gotta remind ourselves the hadith of the Prophet, the camel, right? The man came to the masjid, left his camel free. The Prophet said, "Tie your camel and trust in Allah." So trusting in Allah is doing the things. In this life of cause and effect, the things we gotta do, you do them, and you trust in Allah. That's the difference. Trust in Allah does not mean you're lazy, you just sit back. Allah's going to give me rizq. I'm not going to do nothing. I'm not going to get a job. That's not trust in Allah. That's trust in your laziness. And you're waiting for a handout from someone else. That's what Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, there was a young boy, he told Imam Ahmad, Shaykh, I'm going for Hajj. Oh, he said, oh, nice. Did you make your preparations? He said, I don't need no preparations because I trust in Allah. And then Imam Ahmad asked him, well, okay, who are you going with? He said, I'm going with that group right there. So Imam Ahmad said, your trust is in the food those guys gathered for themselves. You're going to eat from them. You're trusting their food and their provision. That's not trusting in God. That's your laziness. So tawakkul means, it's iman, it's a mindset. But it doesn't mean you don't take the means. So like, you cross the street, right? You watch both sides. What if, like I say, I'm trusting in Allah, I'm not going to look to the right or left. I'm just going to walk through the street. That's silliness. So trusting in Allah created these means. You adopt those means. That doesn't take away from trust in Allah unless you believe those means have power, independent power. That's the thing. We wear the mask trusting in Allah. But if you believe this is going to save you and your trust is not there, then that's wrong. So that's the difference here. So you got to do what you got to do, but by trust, at the same time, trusting in Allah.
Sure. Yeah, one question. The Hadith talks about the 70,000 should enter paradise without accounting, which is significant.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about without accounting or suffering? And that's just going to be straight,
Yeah, so that's amazing, right? Like that's absolutely amazing. So without account literally means that. It means like you're not, you're standing before, everyone has the qiyam, standing before Allah, the day of judgment. No one's going to bypass that. And then, so everyone's going to stand there for 50,000 years in that terrible day. There's no way around that. But then when the judgment begins, which is hisab, Yawm al-Hisab, some people are going to have judgment, and it's going to be easy judgment. That's why there's a dua, Allahumma hasibna hisaban yasira, right? Or we ask Allah for an easy account. And there are many things that Allah is going to skip over. So there's an easy account that some people go through. But then there's a harder account. If Allah looks at every dot and every letter then we're in trouble. So that's why as believers we're supposed to ask Allah to pardon us, to wipe out our sins, make our slates clean, so that they don't show up on those books. Because if Allah were to ask us about every detail, then we're in trouble. And there are some people that will have every detail asked about. But then there will be people who have no hisab. They don't have that at all. And, 70,000 is a large number, but in the grand scheme, there's 1.2 billion Muslims today. If you look at the total number of Muslims from the beginning to now, like that number is very small. We should strive to be like that, but it's not a huge number. There is a narration that 70,000, for every 70,000, for every one of these individuals, it's another 70,000. Allahu Alam how authentic that is. That makes the number much higher. There's also an opinion, 70,000 not literal. That's pretty strong too. There'll be people like that, but 70,000 is just a metaphor for a large number. But there will be people like that. And this is not the only hadith about that. There are other hadith about without a count. So I don't have a comprehensive listing for you, but there are other people that will go to paradise without a count, in other narrations, in other reports, that are involved in other things other than this. These are not the only ones. So we should ask Allah to make us enter paradise without hisab, and if there is hisab, to make it easier. Right? Inshallah. Yes,
What about the statement of the Imam? It goes up and down. Like, people always, that's a frequent used statement.
Mm-hmm. So Iman does go up and down. So that's
compared to tawakkul.
These are the people that Iman just keeps going up. That's these people.
So we're the people that our Iman goes up and down because of the time that we're living?
Iman can go up and down. It can go up and down for everyone. And it fluctuates. But I don't know if you guys buy Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. If you look at the NASDAQ, there's certain things. This is like how they go. They go up, they go down. 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 See that? They go up, they go down. It is going up and down. But the overall process, where is it going? Up. That's these people. They might have a temporary fluctuation where it goes down. But it just keeps going up. And at the end of look where they're at. This is other types of people that go up, down, like this. They're just teetering on faith. That's very different, up and down. So yeah, everyone goes up and down, fluctuates, but overall trajectory for these people is up, nothing but up. So that's very different. And there's some people, they might start up here and keep going down. There's people like that, and then they lose their faith. So there are different versions of up and down. But like the real believers, people of tawakkul, the awliya, they just keep going up. There might be a fluctuation. Ramadan is going up. After Ramadan, it might go down slightly. But overall, it's still up, right? That's not a significant change. Yes?
You just answered an important question for me. I was going to ask you whether or not it was in the latter of things. I've read some ulama say, whatever the Prophet ﷺ emphasized first was most important, but first could be last and last could be first, according to the graph that you just gave too. Huh?
Yeah. What do you mean by first or last?
Like in a narration, he said, in Surah Al-Nisa, Allah said that to rely on Allah, I'm paraphrasing now, to put your trust in Allah first, that the worship of Allah is first and not to make shirk with Him. And then second comes the lowering of the wings of humility to your parents. And then so on and so on and so on forth. Like here, the most important thing is the worship of Allah. And then what comes next is for the parents. I was thinking about that in terms of the hadith, and I was saying to myself, well, maybe I'm wrong here in assessing that, okay, seeking Rookia comes first, and then the omens next, and then...
Oh, okay. Well, so here we don't know if, this is the order that is was said by the Prophet ﷺ, because it could be the narrators, when they narrate the story, they might have mixed up the order. And here, not only they mixed up the order, they put an extra thing there, and they just drop something out. So the order probably is not important here. So there's certain things the order is important, but here I don't, because you've got to see the hadith, like you have to do a macro analysis of the hadith. And when you look at all the different versions, all the different isnads, it has different orders. When you see that situation, that means the order is not important. That means the narrators, they recalled it differently. So this hadith, for instance, it appears in Bukhari in 3 places. And one of them says, La yatatayyarun, la yastarqun, la yaktawun. So this is first, this is second, and la yaktawun is third, cauterization. And then in another chapter from a different isnad, from Ishaq ibn Rahawayh, Bukhari narrates, it only has la yatatayyarun and la yastarqun. Doesn't even have the third thing, only mentions 2 things. And then in Sahih Muslim, it has this version, it has that version. So the versions are different. So here you can see that the bottom line is وَعَلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ, but it's not like a hierarchy. You can't make a hierarchy in everything. You got to know where hierarchy is important. Like in the Hadith of Jibreel, the hierarchy is probably important. Iman comes first, then Islam, and then that also has different order of the questions. But here the hierarchy or the order is not important.
My question is, when we get a hadith from the Prophet ﷺ, when we say Qala Rasul or someone says Qala Rasul, is this a literal kind of rendition of what he said, or is it I'm taking the main idea of what he said, but I'm putting it in my words? So how are we able to, they say this hadith is authentic. When I heard the lesson, I may give the lesson to my son, but I'm not using the words that you use, but I'm carrying the idea.
Sure.
Does that still count as a sahih narration?
But you're referring to the Sahih narration. So, okay.
Because only reason I say this because I'm looking at the different words, and it's the same idea, but it's different wordings, which make me, unless the Prophet must have said these different hadiths on different occasions, or does the different Sahaba heard the same thing, but they put it in their words and they related it to the next tabi or something like that.
That's a good question. So when you have that kind of situation where the questions are different or the wordings are different, is it different occasions? We know the answer to that because there's a long pre-story here. Everyone's sitting there and the Prophet tells them of his dream. He didn't have that dream more than once. So that's one occasion. And then Uqasha raised his hand and the Prophet said, okay, you are one of them. And then the rest said, okay, what about us? Too late. That didn't happen more than once. That's one incident. So this hadith, for sure, when you look at that situation, is one occasion. So if there are different versions, first of all, you have to sift out what's weak from what's not weak. Like this one was weak, right? This part. When he's left with the strong narrations, then there's a slight difference in the wordings. So that's very insignificant. So the strong narration that are left have these 3 features. Number 2 and 3 here, and yaktawun. The order might be different, but there's exact same words even. So in that sense, that's the sound narration. So not every verse. So you can't look at every version out there and try to come up with some story to combine, because a lot of them are mistakes and a lot of them are weak. So there is a strong version that comes out and it's pretty solidly close. There's very minor variations, but there are variations. Now the deeper question you have about paraphrasing, were the scholars paraphrasing? Yes, because when we teach others, we always use our own words, right? So when you teach this information to someone else, you might be using your own set of words. So you might paraphrase things differently. So, and that's look at what Imam Nawawi did. He paraphrased the hadith from Bukhari and Muslim. But when we really nitpick into it, it's not in Bukhari and you use the wrong version. So you got to understand what paraphrasing is. When I teach and you teach, we're paraphrasing. But nobody can take my words from this lecture and say this is a Sahih hadith, write it down, and then start teaching that a hadith. You have to go to the original. So So you got to go to Bukhari and Muslim.
So my question is, but when we, in terms of the Sahaba that narrate from,
From those, were they paraphrasing? That's another
right now,
question.
are they saying the Prophet ﷺ said this exactly, or are they saying, I heard the Prophet say, me and him, me and my uncle, we could have been around the Prophet ﷺ, and we heard the same thing, but when he narrated, he may switch the order, like, I remember this stood out most to me, so this is what I naturally mentioned first. But for me, maybe what the Prophet ﷺ said here stood out most for me. So in the same hadith, I'm gonna mention that first because that's what meant most to me. But we both are narrating the same idea or the same. Right. So how do we, when we see different words, and how do we understand that?
Do we have to give adhan? Like, should I take a break?
Inshallah.
Okay. And I'll answer right after the adhan, or then I'll. So most of the early scholars were paraphrasing to some extent. It's called riwaya bil ma'na, but not to a large extent like we do today. So they were doing it, I think Imam Shu'bah said, or Sha'bi, one of them, that if it could have been Zuhri, I have to look it up. If we were to stick to exact words, we would only have 2 or 3 hadith left. So generally speaking, there was this notion of paraphrasing or giving the gist of what the Prophet said. But the caveat there is they were trying to be as exact as possible. And there's so many hadith, they said, I forgot the 3rd question. They were paraphrasing, it wouldn't matter. They wouldn't have the need. The hadith has the words, I forgot the 3rd question. Or a lot of hadith have, the Prophet said this, or he could have said this word. So that tells you they were trying to be very exact. But this is human knowledge, and human knowledge, sometimes there are differences that occur in like the normal way. But it's not like today, we would just corrupt the words and make up our own meanings. Like, it's not as loose as we think, and it's not as strict as we think.